Welcome to Module 2, Costs and Scale, Competition, and Analysis of Markets. Just a little recap. Last time, in the last module, we covered consumer theory, and that all culminated in the market demand curve. The market demand curve is going to be with us all term. We'll use it today, we'll use it every day, essentially. But today, what we're going to do is shift over to the supply side. We want to put demand and supply together for supply and demand analysis, and analysis of competitive markets, and a whole bunch more. In this module in particular, we're going to cover three topics. The first is costs and scale. And the question there is, how many firms fit into a market? It turns out the answer to that is going to determine a lot about how the market works. We'll talk also a little bit about changing technology that changes the optimal scale of operation. It makes for very interesting economic and business events. Second broad topic for this module was perfect competition. So we'll talk about how profit maximizing output decisions are made, and this results in the perfectly competitive firm supply curve. We'll also talk about short and long run industry supply curves. And then we'll do a little bit on the analysis of competitive markets. And this includes both welfare analysis as well as the impacts of taxes and quotas on the equilibrium in these perfectly competitive markets. All this stuff will become clear over the course of this module. Now, before we jump into it, or before I leave you and you get into the nuts and bolts, I want to motivate this a little bit. So on the topic of competition and supply in the short run and long run, we've had some very interesting events in the past few years. For the past few years, we're sort of coming out of it now, but for the past few years, the U.S. and the world economies have suffered the after effects of really a huge financial crisis. Now, I'm going to make the argument that a little bit of microeconomics of the sort that we're covering in this module could have saved us a lot of pain. And so let me go ahead and be bold and say how we could have avoided a $0.7 trillion blunder. Of course, that's a bit of an exaggeration, but that's okay. Now, what do I mean? Well, I'm thinking about this boom we had in the late 2000s. So there was this boom on. If you look at the house price index for the city of Phoenix and compare that with the little red line, which is the S&P 500, notice that around 2005, 2006, home prices are rising much more quickly than equities. And you could ask yourself, hey, is this a good time to buy? It wasn't just Phoenix, also Miami. Here's the same picture, although now with Miami's data. You can see again in around 2004, 2005, and so forth, the price of housing is just skyrocketing in Miami relative, say, to what's happening with the S&P 500. Similar things were going on in San Diego. Similar things were happening in Las Vegas. You might ask yourself, hey, is it time to bet the house? Even in more sober places like Minneapolis and Detroit, there were pretty substantial appreciations in housing. Not as strong, not as pronounced as in some of those other cities. But before we place our bets, before we decide whether, hey, 2005, would this be a great time to buy? Let's do the mechanics of supply and see if the lessons of this module can't have helped us.